What's up, guys? Kevin Allen here, aka The Geek from DFS Army, and today we're looking at strategies to help you win NFL Showdown contests on Draftkings and FanDuel. That's right, the Showdowns are single game contests. They generally happen primetime, Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday Night Football, and to me, these are some of the most winnable contests that you get all throughout the NFL season on FanDuel and DraftKings. And interestingly, I think a lot of people play them wrong. So I want to get into some strategies to help you improve your game here and up your Showdown success rate. Now, basically, to start with the basics, here on DraftKings, Showdowns are single game formats. You choose a captain position and a bunch of flex positions. And this is the key thing. The only difference between captain and flex is the captain, you take the same player from the flex, but if they're a captain, you pay 1.5x the salary and you get 1.5x the scoring. So you're not just looking for raw points, although that does help, but a combination of raw points and value. Now, there are some interesting, let's call them metrics to go over, because really the key to winning Showdowns is working that captain position properly. So I want to get into a couple of ownership things, and we've looked at historically what wins Showdowns, and the field is a little bit off on what they do. And the biggest spot, especially on DraftKings, where the field has been wrong, has been the quarterback spot. The field plays quarterbacks at around a 35% rate at captain. Now, they do win, but quarterback only wins between 20 to 25% of the time. So the 30 to 35% field weighting it's overexposing the captain position to quarterbacks. Now, when you remove running quarterbacks, the numbers get even smaller. Now, the first thing I want to explain is why the field tends to put the quarterbacks there. Quarterbacks carry the highest mean projection generally of any player on any team. If you're just using an optimizer and allowing it to figure it out, the optimizer is effectively going to give you what I'd call a cash type of lineup. A cash lineup is looking for high floor players in the most lucrative spots. The problem is when a quarterback is a pocket passer, for them to produce a monster score, and they're not running the football. And so let's look at this game here. We've got Dak, for example. If we were to put Dak as captain, he's not a running quarterback. That doesn't mean he can't produce a monster score that would win you the tournament this week, but he probably needs to run one in accidentally. And that's normally what would happen to get a player like Dak in there. If not, he would have to feed multiple different players touchdowns on his team to the point where the spread was good enough that not any one wide receiver did enough damage to offset his score. So generally, your pocket passers are especially negative in terms of running them at captain in these lineups. So again, the field owns quarterbacks at a 28 to 35% level, whereas the optimal captain rate is down closer to 20%. So there's leverage by simply either not using quarterbacks at captain or using less than what you normally would or what the field is doing. So let's call it, keep it light in terms of quarterback in the captain spot, specifically on FanDuel, where the scoring favors wide receivers and running backs. In addition, just getting into ownership rates, and running back and wide receiver, because they're over on captain, the two spots where the field actually goes a little too high on are both quarterback and tight end. The field tends to actually get a little too much tight end at the captain spot too. It's not that much, only a 2% difference there, but the spot to gain leverage is the wide receiver and running back position. Even on FanDuel, that favors wide receivers. The field ownership for running backs, the captain spot, tends to be in the 22 to 26% range, whereas running back optimal rates are well over 30, closer to 35%. Similar for wide receivers. The field is about 10% too low on captain wide receiver than they should be. So starting point, if we're talking DraftKings, focus on wide receivers and running backs at captain tips. Select your captain from favored teams, as favored teams produce nuts captains between 62 to 75% of the time. In totals that are greater than 47 points, completely avoid defense or kicker at captain. High scoring games, defenses tend not to get there. And if you are going to choose a captain, it's very important to correlate off that captain. So if we do choose a pocket passing QB as our captain, one of the great things about the tools at DFS Army, like Domination Station, we can set up our stacks. If you put a pocket passer quarterback like Dak Prescott as your captain, you're going to want not one, but two of his pass catchers in there to offset the fact that, hey, if Dak Prescott's having a monster game and all of the passes are going to CeeDee Lamb, CeeDee Lamb will outscore Dak, right? So the only version of a Dak captain lineup that works out is going to be where a second name, be it a Pickens or a Ferguson, the tight end, or even a Tolbert, the wide receiver 3. Like, you'd need Dak plus at least two of these in order order to justify playing a captain quarterback. Now, on the flip side, if you have a rushing quarterback like Jalen Hurts, we don't have to worry as much about stacking him with two. Even stacking him with just one of his pass catchers is enough. And sometimes you might even run a rushing quarterback out there naked, although I'm less inclined to do that. Now, one of the challenges in winning showdowns is duplication and ownership. So one of the problems with this format is you're going to see a lot of ties. There's not many players to choose from. And if you go high owned with all the players in your lineup, or most of the players in your lineup, especially if you take a high owned captain, chances are the lineup you create is going to wind up in a giant tie group. And even if you win, your winnings might not be as exciting as you might think. Like, this is a 1 million to first contest. I've won a 1 million to first showdown contest where I had to share with something like, I don't know, it could have been 1,000 people. It was a Super Bowl, and I think I walked away with like $1,200. That was a $1 million to first prize. I did come in first, but in a giant tie, you're just not going to see that much. So one of the tricks to avoiding some of the dupes, there are a few, but one of my primary tricks is simply to reduce the total salary of your lineup a little bit, so that you don't fall on, for example, on DraftKings, we don't fall on an exactly 50K spend. Almost every 50K spend will be used. So what I do is I'll take the DFS Army Domination Station Optimizer, and I'll put a total salary cap, let's say 49.5. So I'm ensuring that at least my lineups are somewhat accurate. Now, the second component to making your lineups somewhat unique, not accurate, unique is the right word, but the second trick to making your lineup somewhat unique is to use total ownership caps, right? Each contest is different, but we have the ability, we can see what the ownership of each player is, and you can set a cap on your optimizer run to make sure that you're not putting lineups in that are overly chalky. That will hopefully avoid duplication. Now, guys, correlation is king in showdowns. After all, it's just a one-game contest, right? So every player is somewhat tied to the other players in the contest just by default. But it's really important to emphasize game scripting and correlation in the lineup construction. And if you're using an optimizer or the Domination Station optimizer, making sure that the rules you're putting in will create some correlation. So beyond just the pocket passer captain plus 2 pass catchers from the same team rule, we also want to consider rules like, for example, if a WR is your captain, then include that their quarterback in the flex as a lock button. Right? That's one. Another one could be if you use a running back as your captain, avoid using the RB2 in the same lineup from the same team. Further, if we're looking at a game with a high total, we might want to ping pong wide receivers from both teams. So if wide receiver is in lineup, then give a boost to wide receivers from the opposing team to kind of get a high scoring game flow approach to lineups, any lineups that you might use wide receiver as a captain. Similarly, if a game has a low total, very low, and especially if one team has a really low total and the other team a little bit higher, I might be looking to combine running back captain with same team defense in the flex. Defense dominates, running back dominates. A lot of times I even mix the kicker into those stacks, saying this team is just going to dominate, kick a bunch of field goals, run for touchdowns. The other team, that's that 42-0 game script or that 21-0 game script that we see all the time in the NFL. Guys, one advanced tip that I want to give here to close this video out, and this is hard to do, but you will find it extremely profitable if you do, is when you attack these showdowns, understand that ownership leverage is truly the king. One of my biggest showdown wins ever came when it was a Christian McCaffrey slate. He was on the Panther. It was years ago. Yeah, that's right. He was on the Panthers, and it was a game against the Bucks. And the Bucks at that time were considered this horrific run defense. And basically, the point is McCaffrey was going to be something around 95% owned in that showdown. He ended up having a dud, and the lineups that I built about 20% of my lineups where I faded him, and those were the ones that wound up making me all the money for that slate. So ownership leverage is king. If you see a player in a showdown, especially with an ownership number north of 80%, there is always and no matter how good the spot is, no matter how much of a lock that player is to smash, it makes a lot of sense to fade those spots in your tournament entries. It's just not going to help you if that player ends up smashing. When you are loading up on the 80-90% owned guy, you're getting no leverage on the field. The way you leverage the field is through ownership fading, and it's going to be painful when you do it. It's going to hurt. And honestly, most touts are not going to tell you to do that because they're going to be wrong. wrong more often than not, and it doesn't feel good to be wrong. You're going to be wrong and wrong and wrong until you're finally right. So have the balls to fade ownership. The higher the ownership, the more aggressive you should be thinking. Why? Look for a reason to fade that player. That move and that move alone will help your showdown game immensely. And you know what else will help your showdown game immensely? Tuning into the Showdown Breakdown here on the DFS Army YouTube channel. Every time a showdown happens, we break it down for you, the Thursday nighters, the Monday nighters. So make sure you're subscribed here on the YouTube channel here at DFS Army and get signed up. Of course, DFS Army if you want access to the domination station, cheat sheets, and all that good stuff. Good luck this season. We will see you guys next time.